Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chelsea Stone, and I am the SVP of Global Service, Commercial, and Products for Vestas, which in plain words means that I decide what Vestas sells in the service space and how. I am here today as the moderator for your panel, but because we are blessed to have such an intimate audience, I think it would be great for our panelists to know who we're looking at a little bit so that we can calibrate our conversation to make sure it's as effective as possible for you. So that being said, before I have our panelists introduce themselves, can I have you raise your hand if you have changed a role in the last 18 months? Okay, that's a pretty good quorum in the audience, actually. Raise your hand if you are looking to change a role in the next 18 months. Love that some of you raised your hand for both of those. Fantastic. Okay, great, thanks. I think that helps us think a little bit about how we can be most effective to you today. So I'm just gonna go ahead and go down the line and ask you to introduce yourselves. Emily, let's start with you.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Emily Lopez, also from Vestas. I am the Senior Vice President of HR, or People and Culture, as we like to call it at Vestas, for our Americas region, which is the US and Canada. I've been here for just over 18 months and a variety of HR leadership roles across industries before that. So happy to be here and looking forward to the panel today.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tanya Muse. I lead Heidrick and Struggles Association practice out of Washington, D.C. Heidrick and Struggles is a global executive search and leadership advisory firm. I spend my time placing executives in CEO and senior level roles in primarily trade associations, nonprofits, and individual member organizations.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ebony Seymour. I am the founder and CEO of Element Group, which is a boutique recruitment agency where I partner with developers, independent power producers, and investment firms to help them make strategic hires across their business, primarily focusing on development, project finance or structured finance, investment professionals, and asset managers.
I am Souzi Weiland, Senior Vice President of People and Culture, which is also HR, for Signal and Applied High Voltage, which we are soon to become Covolt Power, a power infrastructure company.
Great, thank you so much. So I will tell you all that just before we came in here, we had an incredibly fascinating conversation at a table about these topics. So I'm very confident in the ability of this group to act on the fly with what is most interesting. So we are going to start with some of the conversations that we had prepped as a part of our flow. But if you feel like in response to anything that anybody says, you have a really burning question that you would like to ask before we get to the end, where we will also leave time for audience questions, feel free to throw your hand up there. Let's make this a conversation, not just this way, but also this way. Great, so let's jump in. And Souzi, let's start with you and work this way. But first question, what do you see people getting wrong when they are thinking about preparing to make the next step?
I think that we often think that what got us here is going to take us there. And that's a fallacy, especially as you expand your role, especially as you go up and climb the kind of the corporate ladder, if you will. Earlier in your career, technical capability and doing are really critically important. But as you advance, what companies are looking for is systems thinkers, enterprise thinkers, strategy, and so forth.
Great, thanks. Ebony?
Very similar in a way. But one of the things that I think individuals get wrong is when you are earlier in your career, even up to middle management in a way, you are really focusing on executing. That is the skill set that companies hire you for. As you look to make it to the next level, you really have to think about strategic, critical thinking, but also how to be a leader, how to influence business, how to collaborate across parts of the organization. And that's what companies are focused on when they think about leaders is, can you be a leader of a group? Can you be a leader of a team? Can you be a trusted advisor within the business?
To add to that, I would say that individuals don't necessarily know their why and their worth and being able to articulate that. So when I say articulate, you're telling a story and being able to quantify the work that you do, the impact that you do, that you've made on a company or an organization, and also making sure that your resume speaks to who you are as well. That is your brand in the market. And so being able to tangibly articulate with metrics, I'm always looking for metrics, how you have impacted whatever it is, leading people, P&L, growing organizations, sales and revenue, being able to quantify the impact that you have and sell yourself. You've got to be, and it's unfortunate that many times women, people of color, don't always know how or feel comfortable selling themselves.
I think it's a really good point, Tanya. And I think knowing your why is about being able to effectively market and convey your value to the organization, but it's also about alignment with like what personally is satisfying to you. I think a mistake that I see people make often, Chelsea, is they're so focused on a title or an org chart without maybe fully understanding like what would that experience be to work in that job. And I think people that kind of take a step back and spend a bit more time focused on what's the impact and the contribution that I have made and I want to make, what's the experience that I want people to have when they're working for me or alongside me, and then ultimately what are the trade-offs that I'm willing to make to get there. And I think when people are more convicted about that, then they can think about their career much more as a longer-term strategic project that they're investing in versus kind of a set of transactional moves from one title to the next.
Yeah, it's super good points. And I think, Souzi, one of the things you said to me when we were prepping for this conversation is you said, like, I really need to see people take charge of their career. And I think, Tanya, both you and Emily have sort of given pretty concrete examples of, I think, some of the ways that you can articulate your value, but also your purpose. I wonder, I think it's hard sometimes when you are moving into a place where you are really taking control of your career to know if you are ready or if you just feel ready because you might have a blind spot. And I also think that sometimes it's hard to tell if we are being valued at the level we think we're playing at. Can anybody speak to that? How do we do that?
I'm happy to jump in to start. And I made this comment to you, Chelsea, as we were about to walk on stage. One of the capabilities that was not easy for me to build, but has served me well, is feedback, is being really skilled at requesting and processing, and then also not just the reacting piece, but the responding to feedback. I can tell you, I remember it very vividly, like the first time that I ever did a 360 as a leader in an organization, and it was a harrowing experience. I was at the time leading a small team, but we were responsible for like 75% of the function's strategic initiatives for the year. I was fairly new into my leadership career, and and personally, I was planning a wedding. So I was like busting my butt, right, to do all the things, to get the deliverables out to the door, and to be a good supervisor, checking the box on, remembering people's birthdays and doing team building, kind of all the things you think of that you should be doing as a good supervisor. And so granted, looking back, like probably anything other than like, hey, you're doing a fantastic job would have been devastating for me in that moment to receive. And it wasn't easy, right? It wasn't easy to read the report and get the feedback. There were some tears, and I'm pretty sure I wanted to crawl into a hole, which is fine, right? Like, we're human, allow yourself to do that for a period of time. But it was my first like real experience in saying, okay, this feedback is not my identity, but it is information. And it's information about how I'm showing up, how my intent might vary from the impact that I'm actually having. It's information about what matters most to my stakeholders at this point in time. And frankly, on an aggregate basis, it's also insight into what the organization values, at that point in time and what they need from you. And kind of getting over that initial hump of it's hard to hear that you're not doing well on all fronts and figuring out, okay, what can I take from this? 2 to 3 shifts, right? That will bring me closer in alignment between my intent and my impact. And then figuring out how do I replicate that over time so that I constantly have that data and I'm not in jeopardy of a blind spot.
I love that line that feedback is always information. It's not always right? If you get feedback that Emily is a bully, she's not. That is not correct feedback. But it is information. Would any of you like to respond?
I would add to that. Well, one, I'm competitive in nature. And so if you give me feedback and I always take it as constructive. That's the only way I take feedback is constructive. I used to have a boss who would always give me good feedback. And I said to him, I need some constructive feedback. That's the only way I'm going to learn and grow, which speaks to some of what we were talking about in our prep. And I remember I was 25 and I yelled at my boss in front of others, in the middle of our office lobby, actually. And he didn't say anything then. He came into my office, closed the door, and said, don't you ever do that. And so you learn from your mistakes as well. But I also think, and this is something we had not really talked about, but in order to know sometimes if you're ready for a role, it's to have mentors. Have mentors every stage of your career. I have right now mentoring, I think, 4 or 5 individuals. And some are college students and some are seasoned executives, but I'm coaching and guiding them and sharing with them because sometimes you need that person to give you constructive feedback or just to be your cheerleader. One of my mentees was promoted and she was promoted from within, so she's no longer peers, she's supervising her peers. And she is fearful about it. She's worried about, those relationships, but she has to rise to the occasion. She was given an opportunity and not shrink back, but learn from it. And so having that coach and cheerleader to help you get through whatever it is that you're going through is important.
I wonder, can I use a personal anecdote, Ebony and Souzi, to get your take on this, I think the undervaluing part of this question?
Yeah.
So this is a true story, potentially an unflattering true story. So I had been at Vestas for about 8 years when I felt like at the time I was a director in the turbine sales group. And I felt, this is pre-Emily, just for the record. And I felt really ready for my next step. And there was a job, the vice president of service sales for North America. And we had a new president. He had only been in for a couple of months at that time. He did not know me well. And I applied for that job. I got that job, but I got it as the senior director of service sales for North America. And I remember at the time having a conversation with him where I said, either I can do the job that you advertise for, or I can't. And it feels to me like this kind of conversation happens more in some places than it does in others. And he said, Chelsea, I need people to prove themselves to me. And I took that job, and I made VP a year later, and it all worked out fine. But I wonder, how do you advise somebody in that moment who's like, ugh, am I wrong? Are they wrong? Is nobody wrong? Are we not communicating? What do you do with that person?
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting question, and I get it a lot, quite frankly. And I often tell candidates one of 2 things. One, it's not that you're not ready, but it's that you do have to prove yourself, especially in a situation like that where you're stepping into a role where people don't know you. Your leader may not know you. They may not know your experience. They want to make sure that they are setting you up for success. And the way to do that is not to bring you in at a level that may be a big jump. Maybe you don't feel like it's a big jump, but it is a big jump in your career, and you not be equipped to actually be successful. And so oftentimes they will say, look, I want you in this role. I need to bring you in at this level to make sure that you have the skills and to upskill you where you may not. And that's not a bad thing. Like, I talk to candidates about this all the time. It's never a bad thing if someone says, I want to take a chance on you, but it won't be here. You just have to get to there. That's the opportunity for you to come into a role, to show what you have, to ask for feedback, to reiterate on that feedback, and to get to the level that you feel like you're valued at. Because obviously they see something in you, but you just have to prove it. And that's just a matter of stepping up.
Thank you, Ebony. Souzi?
In your example, I think it was all right because you communicated. You showed you were honest and vulnerable about where your disappointment, right, for that title. And they communicated back and said, here's what you need, and you got there. I think it becomes wrong when it's just handed to you and you don't know where the gap is, right? That's not communicated. I think it becomes wrong when it is maybe you, I'll be honest, I've been there, done that, and it felt like I fell short, right? And then I just harbored it and I was angry about it. That's not the right approach either, right? And so to your point, I think if you have open and honest conversations about and are willing to ask for feedback and accept feedback and put a plan in place, and you eventually get to that. I think it's hard when people are chasing titles, like you said, Emily. I have never chased a title. I have goals and I have ambitions and I have a title that I would like one day, but I've never chased titles and I've never chased money. I've chased my why, and I've chased my passion and the things that align with my values. And the money has come. I will tell you that. The titles have come. So it's hard when you're in the thick of it because you know you're capable, but if you're not asking for feedback, if you're not open to hearing feedback, and for those that are already leaders in the room, that's another underrated skill set that I see people holding them back, is to be able to give feedback and to do it with kindness, right? Having difficult conversations. I tell people that honest and kindness go together. Honesty without kindness is just brutality, and kindness without honesty is manipulation. And so those two things go together. And as a leader, that's an underrated skill set. If you haven't learned that early on in your career, I encourage you to invest in that skill set, because then you can, when somebody else is coming to you asking, why didn't I get this title, you can have that honest conversation.
Yeah, clear as kind.
Clear as kind.
It strikes me that some of what we're talking about in some of the last couple answers is, in other words, how to be an effective advocate for yourself. Do you have any more reflections on that? How do you do that in a way that feels authentic and also maybe tied back to the why and more about the mission than instead of seeking something more artificial? Any thoughts on that? We're officially off the list of questions.
I mean, I think one thing that's important to keep in mind with that, Chelsea, is that promotability is not self-defined, as you just illustrated from your example, right? So you do have to understand, like, who in any role with an organization or in any project, right, who is responsible for determining whether or not you will have been successful in that particular job or that particular task. Who is responsible for determining whether or not you have potential beyond what it is that you're doing? And I think too often people get so fixated on what their own personal definition of success is that they lose sight of the fact that there's oftentimes not one person, right? It may be just your direct boss, but a lot of us work for large matrix organizations. There's probably a couple of people, maybe 3 to 4, right, where your work has the greater intersect. And it's really how those individuals define your success that will ultimately determine whether or not you are successful. So I think in terms of just visibility and exposure, it's really important to start with understanding your stakeholders and then understanding how they define success and making sure that you're approaching that job in a way that will convey the impact in their terms.
You have to be your own best advocate. Nobody else can advocate for you but you. You have to know your strengths, know your I don't like to say weaknesses, but know your gaps and deficiencies. Know your passion. I think you'll hear throughout our conversation about value and worth and passion, because it really is important. And be able to as you did, advocate for yourself or step away if this is not feeling right for you. I promoted a woman one time and thinking it because she was with the company for a couple of years, let's just promote her into a vacancy that we had, and she pushed back. She's like, this is not what I want to do. She did not want to be external facing. She wanted something, so we moved her to IT and computers, which was great. So be able to do that. And focus in on where your strengths are. And then if you do want to promote or move up in career, there's training, there's other opportunities to upskill to get those, to fill those gaps.
I like the word growth edges instead of weaknesses. Ebony and Souzi, I feel like we're edging into sort of notions of visibility, right? How are some ways that people can make sure that they are being seen? Any ideas on that?
Yeah, I think one thing about visibility is making sure that you're not being loud, in a sense of sometimes people think visibility means just like put yourself out there just because. But I think you have to think very strategically about how to be visible. So if you are looking to advance in your career, one of the things that people will say is take on a project that is perhaps outside of your scope, but gives you the ability to be visible to people that you may not be visible to in any other instance. I think that's one of the biggest things that I tell people to do from a visibility perspective. But then also make sure that you are being visible in a sense of the people and teams that you'll collaborate with. Make sure they know who you are. Make sure they understand what you do, and ask them how you can help them be better at their job from the seat that you're in. And then people will start to say your name in rooms that you're not in because they remember what you did to help them. You remember the project that you took a chance on and that you succeeded at. So I think those are two ways I would say to be more visible.
Ebony took my answers, but did I? That's exactly what I had in my script too. No, it's great. I think to the point of loudness, I think people also equate that to FaceTime, right? I want to talk to the CEO, right? I want to be present when he or she is in the room, or I want to talk to this person. That could help, but if you're also not bringing anything of substance or value, I kind of midpoint in my career, I had a director who in every meeting with the C-suite, she just always had to say something in response to what they said. And she was adding nothing to the conversation. It was like a regurgitation, right? I was like, she's talking a lot, but she's not saying anything. And her feedback to me was, you should say something. And I'm like, well, if I don't have anything of substance to say or additive to the conversation, I'm not going to say anything, because that's how she made a name for herself, in a very negative light, right? She was the lady who just kind of mimicked what they were already saying, right? I also think that in this day and age with remote work, connection is so important. Yesterday, if you all were in the CEO conversation, they talked about, out of sight, out of mind. I wouldn't go as far as to say that, but I think we have lost touch with connecting with each other. I think we've lost touch with being visible. Being visible isn't always about being in the room. It's just people knowing who you are, that you are helpful, that you have value, you contribute value and so forth. And so if you are remote or if you work hybrid, don't just hide behind the Teams screen, right? And just send Teams, pick up that line and schedule meetings and talk to people. That's how you're gonna find your champion and your sponsors. I also don't align to the additive that here's your career path. I have people ask me that all the time. Where's my career path, right? Do you have it written down? Is it on the company intranet? I believe in create your own adventure. I'm a product of that myself. I started in oil and gas as a accounting and finance person. There was no written career path for me to get into human resources or people. I had to create it, and I had to fight for it. But I never gave up, and I fought for it in the right way. I didn't just get mad at people that told me, no, you shouldn't do this, just stay in finance. So.
I wonder, this is a real question. We talked a little bit when we were getting ready for this panel about authenticity and about how it feels like the workplace is more encouraging and tolerant of a wide range of self-expression than it maybe used to be. But Souzi, do you mind repeating what you heard yesterday in the CEO panel about bring your full self or your...
It was one of my favorite lines. It's Carla said, bring your best self to work, not your whole self, your best self. Very important distinction.
Yeah, and I wonder if, and when we think about being authentic at work and bringing our best selves, if that makes us more memorable when we do have that sort of FaceTime and we have that presence. How do you think about, I think for some people, it costs you something not to bring your full self to work.
Absolutely.
And I think for other people, it costs them something to bring their full selves at work. Mm-hmm. How should people think about how they show up as themselves? Mm-hmm. Any reflections on that?
I'll just give a personal, it's not necessarily directly answering the question, but I'll give a personal anecdote which aligns with, Emily, what you said about accepting or feedback is information. Mm-hmm. But I am I like to joke around a lot. I like to keep it lighthearted. It doesn't mean that I'm not serious. Mm-hmm. And I got feedback from a CEO that you're just not serious. Now, also, he never worked with me on anything serious. We were always talking about the fun stuff, right? Leadership development programs and so forth. And it really bothered me. And I ruminated on that over and over because to me, he was asking me to be the exact opposite of who I am. Mm-hmm. And I had a mentor tell me, but it's up to you to accept that, right? Mm-hmm. If that's what's going to hold you back with this one CEO, maybe that's okay, because what do you lose if you lean into that a little bit harder? And I did. I chose not to lean into that feedback and accept it and just be who I am, which is what made me effective with every other success that I had in the company.
Mm-hmm. Chelsea, one of the things that I often reflect on as it relates to this, because sometimes I think people weaponize authenticity to be a bully or a jerk, to someone else. And I think what you have to keep in mind, I'll go back to one of the statements I made up front around what's the experience that you want to create for people that you're working with, your peers, your direct reports, your boss. And there's an intersect between being yourself and also creating favorable conditions for others to succeed, right? Mm-hmm. So you kind of have to think about what might be most organic for me in this moment. Like, does that create a negative impact on someone else? If the answer to that is yes, probably not okay. But I don't think those things are mutually exclusive. I think there's a way in which for you to think about who you are, how you operate most effectively, which is required for it to be sustainable, right? Because if you're constantly in this space where you're showing up and you're feeling like you have to be someone other than you're not, like you're likely to be really unhappy and mm-hmm. exhausted. So you have to think about, okay, what is sustainable for me? What's authentic to me? And also, how do I align that with the experience that I want to create for others?
I like that a lot. I will tell you that I am somebody who has gotten feedback about having a big personality at work before. And I used to think that any curtailment of that personality was inauthenticity. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the lessons I've actually really only learned in the last couple of years is that there is a difference between inauthenticity and intentional display of authenticity. Mm-hmm. 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 Any more reflections on that before we move on?
Well, Emily, to your point, one of the things I hear is yes, I'm being authentic. This is who I am. Or if we do like assessments, Berkman assessment, DISC assessments, well, this is how I am. it's a way to not be accountable also, right? Or a way not to accept feedback or to improve or evolve, right? Just because, I'll give you an example of my husband's Berkman. He has very low empathy. And so his excuse is, see, I'm low empathy. I'm like, that is not an excuse for you not to develop it. We could take it from a 2 to a 10, and it would be a significant improvement. And so it can't just, like what you said is how I look at performance. It's what you accomplish and also the how. If you are leaving dead bodies in your wake, it does not matter what you accomplish.
I think when you show up as your authentic self, it creates a very congenial environment and atmosphere. If you think about best places to work, that's what you want to do. I mean, there's plenty of statistics that show when you have an inclusive work environment, diverse work environment, people come and do their best work. And so when you can be yourself, joking, I like to play jokes and laugh, and people come who cook, or if they're very, sports oriented, if you bring that to work, you're getting to know people and you're getting excited around the people that you're working with, and you do a much better job.
Yeah. One of the other things we were talking about when we were having our great conversation that all of you missed is that it feels like maybe a couple generations ago there was this idea that you needed to put in the time, right? To get promoted, you needed to put in the time. And then maybe a generation ago it became more about like, well, no, I'm just really good, right? I'm dug into the thing that I do and I'm really good at it, and that's the thing that matters. And Ebony was reflecting that maybe the thing that we're sort of seeing with the current generation and in the workforce now is that it's not specialization, but it's range. Do you want to reflect on that at all?
Yeah. So one of, actually a candidate that I interviewed, we had a really interesting conversation, and he was telling me about how he was thinking about his career, and he recommended this book called Range. I can't remember who it's by, but you can look it up. And it talks about how you can be a generalist and that companies value generalists because you have had the opportunity to work in different spaces within an organization and gain different skill sets, to now you have a view of an organization from a high level instead of being a specialist. And I'm not saying one is better than the other, so I don't want you to quote me on this. But I think what it does is it gives you the opportunity to be able to critically think across a business. Versus when you're a specialist, you think very often in a vertical. You think about what that team does. You think about what you can improve only in that team sometimes. And it may take a lot more for you to think outside of the box of what you've built this specialty in. And so having range oftentimes can give you this ability to look across an organization and think strategically and really help with solving complex problems and increasing the value that you bring to the business because you've had the opportunity to experience different things. So I think now generations, and people call them job hoppy, but new generations, they want to experience different companies. They want to experience different skill sets because it really does give them the ability to learn about what they actually like. No one wants to build a career in something that you don't like, and then 10 years later you're like, wish I had did something else. So now generations are taking the opportunity to learn different skill sets and figure out what they really love and then build their career from there. And I think that's something that, honestly, I appreciate and admire.
That's great. It makes me think about, like, lateral moves, which I feel like a lot of people find constraining on their face, right? It feels like a failure if you're taking a lateral move. Does anyone want to speak to that?
I will. Because I talk to candidates about making lateral moves often. And everyone wants a jump, right? I don't want to move unless my title changes. I don't want to leave unless my compensation increases. And those things can be valid in a way. But the thing about a lateral move is you're not taking a step back in your career. You're not a failure because it's not a promotion or a different title. But it actually gives you the ability to see maybe the same thing you've been doing, but from a different lens, from a different company's viewpoint, which honestly, now a lot of companies want to see people that have been at one or two companies before they come, because they want you to bring that value. They want you to bring that knowledge base. They want you to help them become better, because they may have leaders that have only been at that one company and that have thought just in a sense of, I say element group, right? It's only me, but at some point, I'm going to have leaders in the business that only think in an element group way. But they want people that have seen different viewpoints so that you can bring that to the organization and say, that's interesting that you do it that way. Here's what I saw when I worked here. Maybe we can implement that here, and it makes your process better.
Tanya, do you have anything to add based upon your experience with candidates?
I would add that you are also potentially having the opportunity to stretch your skills and challenge yourself. It really depends on the environment that you're transitioning to. So think about, as we think about career trajectory, you might have to take a lateral move in order to get to where you're going. So don't necessarily dismiss it or discount it, but see if you understand the dynamics inside of that organization, and is that the path to give you new skills, give you new exposure to get to where you want to go.
I think that's spot on. I mean, talked a little bit about kind of long-term view, like what's the impact and the contribution that you want to make, and then what are the skills that are required that you need to build along the way to get there. The other thing that I'll say is a lateral move is a lot easier to swallow than a demotion. And the higher up you go in an organization, the harder it becomes to pivot to a different function or to a different job. So it's a bit of the range versus the specialty. If you're in a space where you're looking to really strengthen your range, right, it's better to do that now and be intentional about what that gets you today to help you be more promotable, right, to have more potential going forward, versus to be on a very linear path up and then realize that you're stuck.
You know, to that, back to the range versus being vertical, I spend my time placing CEOs and senior level executives. And when you have internal individuals who think they can do the job or want to do the job, they might be in communications, they might be a CFO, they might be in government affairs. But do they have, I call it enterprise-wide leadership? Are they able to really, from here, look at the entire organization in a strategic manner and be able to navigate and work with boards and other stakeholders to drive that organization? Where candidates fall short is they can't get out of their lane. So as a CEO or senior, even a member of the senior team, you are really navigating that organization. So are you aware of the finances? Are you aware of where you're investing? Are you aware of what the board needs? Are you aware of what's going on in the media? If you are just in your lane and not thinking up here, it's very hard.
Great. I want to leave time for questions. So I think here I'm going to ask each of you, is there anything that you would like to leave the audience with? One piece of advice. If you had to make sure that everybody walked out with one takeaway from you, what would it be? Emily?
I would say manage your career as a long-term strategic project and think about what the impact is that you want to have. Think about what's the experience that you want to create for others, and then what are the trade-offs. And I think the decisions around which job to take, and frankly, the resilience when you don't get the job that you want, I think that'll flow just more easily if you do that.
I'm not sure if you meant it that way, but the idea that you're actually managing it as a project that is separate from your own identity, I think that is very powerful. Tanya?
Mine is know your why, know what your strengths are, know what areas you need to learn and stretch yourself, be able to sell yourself and be comfortable selling yourself.
Yeah.
I would say make sure that you know that you are the CEO of your own career. No one, and I mean no one, can determine where you can go or how you can go there. You are the one that will really determine that. So make sure that you're in the driver's seat when it comes to your career.
Souzi?
I would say work on your resilience. Resiliency is a muscle. And in our industry, as there's a lot of change, there's a lot of growth and ups and downs, and I hear a lot of people complain about burnout.
Yeah.
That's because our resiliency muscle isn't up to par. But that pressure isn't always a bad thing, because it's pressure that creates diamonds. So lean into the uncomfortable along the way as well.
Fantastic. Thank you. Audience questions. We left so much time. I'm positive we're going to use it very well. Do you have one there?
Don't be
No?
shy.
All right.
Yeah.
Josette, I knew we could count on you.
Hi. Hello. I know I always ask questions. I'm sorry, y'all, but
No.
it is
We
what
love
it is.
this. We love
Yes.
this. This is great
Just
behavior
kidding, you're
for all
welcome,
of you to
y'all.
emulate. Visibility.
Yes, this is one of my favorite panels, I think, because I don't know anyone in my life who doesn't struggle with visibility. I'm going to word this delicately. In my life, I have tried some of these great techniques, and I've been actively undermined in my career. Luckily, I left those places, but when I was in those places, or my friends are in those places, I'd love to hear from you all, what do we do if we're doing all these great things and we just feel like, okay, there's one person or maybe the culture is undermining you. How does anything that you're sharing shift or change in that environment? Thank you.
What was the last one? Stuff and shift.
I struggled with it a little bit.
What's the last part of your question? How do you shift?
So I guess of the great advice you're giving, does any of it shift? Does any of it shift or change the great stuff that you shared in an environment where it's not just about lack of visibility, but potentially actively undermining, or having a culture that refuses to see you, like we saw with Carla yesterday? Thank you.
I actually have a reflection on that, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I think we as a society connote failure with negativity. And sometimes you do all of the right things and you still fail at the thing that you're trying to do. And reacting to that failure is just a reality becomes a success, right? A failure is only a failure if you sit in it. And I think if you have done the things, you've had the conversation, you've reflected on yourself, you've looked for feedback, you've built your network, you've done all of the things, it is an unfortunate reality that sometimes people and sometimes places suck. And not everywhere is for everyone. And I think that there is so much power and self-respect that you should accord yourself in saying, this is not for me. Thank you, next.
I would agree with that, Chelsea. And I think I talked about feedback before and just how valuable that's been for me, throughout the course of my career. I think feedback and also data. Like, there have been times stepping into a difficult conversation that I was probably 95% sure was going to end in disappointment for me. But I also knew that that was data that I still needed to have, even if it was about what Chelsea is saying, the misalignment between maybe the impact and the contribution that I was looking to make and the value that I was adding and the organization's interpretation of it. So I would, and you did a nice job, Souzi, of this earlier. You said communication, not reaction. Like, I would think about it calmly and rationally and say, get more than one data point, right? We rarely make decisions just based on more than one data point. But when you have that insight, to Chelsea's point, like, that is information that you need to then decide maybe this isn't for you.
I'll just add, I think that everything that we've talked about, the tips and tricks that we talked about today, are contingent upon the baseline being an organization who cares about their people, right? And cares about culture and branding it that way. And so as someone who is working actively to do that in our organization, I think it could be easily taken for granted. But I've been there as well. I've been in those organizations where, with the feedback, with the communication, it was very difficult. And one thing I tell people is suffering is optional. And so if you've done all of these things that we've said and it's still not yielding it, and then you made the decision for yourself, right? You chose not to suffer and move on. That is the organization's loss. I will say. It's our job up here to ensure that the environment and the culture and the leadership are actively working to support all of that and not negate it.
You should also not underestimate the value of you being a light for other people. Because people who stand up for themselves in difficult environments like that show other people that it's possible. And I will tell you, in my own career, I am very Vestas proud. I've been here for 13 years, and I'm happy to be. Vestas has not always been the great place it is today. And there were moments early in my career where I felt like I had this conversation with myself about whether it would be easier to go somewhere where I felt like the culture was more aligned, or whether I felt like I could make a real difference. And I think that that is just a choice that you make at different points in your life based upon the capacity you have at that moment in your life. But you should never underestimate the power that you have for the next person who comes after you who might have to confront the same thing, because you've already started the conversation. Other questions? Yeah.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for making time. I guess personal dilemmas. When you're dealing with like a high motivated individual and you come to work in a place where there's a lot of change management, a lot of changing, and you're put in a place where you are here to make a change and you are making a change, but there's people within the organization that's not ready for that change, and you have voice, how can things be better? At what point do you cut your losses where do you cut your losses and say, hey, what do you really want from me? Do you want efficiency, or you want continuity with what's been going on with the status quo?
Yeah, it's a little bit hard to hear you, but I think I'm going to repeat back to you, and then you're going to correct me. This is what we're going to do. I think what I heard you say is when you're brought into a place where you need to create some change, right? You're doing some change management, and you're running into people who are just like, no. At what point do you say like, oh, okay, I guess you actually want to go with the status quo, versus how do you continue to advocate? Is that right?
If I'm in a position where I'm supposed to do A, I'm going to do A because that's my goal. But when there is other circumstances that are preventing me from doing it, where do I decide? Do I continue to make a progress on what I was being here to do, or do I stick to the status quo because that's what's going to prevail and make me grow here?
And prevail and make you
Grow. And be accepted.
About implementing change.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's a great question, and it does happen quite a bit. I always start with, one, you were hired to do a job, so you stay focused on the goal. You have to communicate clearly what your goal is. So throughout the organization, you have to come in and build trust. That's first and foremost. So it's trust, communication, collaboration. And it's how you do it. So coming in and making immediate change, being very disruptive, is not going to work in any situation. And so it's being thoughtful, methodical about how you are doing it and communicating it all the way. And if you can bring others along making them feel like they're part of the process and it's not being done to them, but they're with you. They see the bigger picture, they're part of the goal. That's how you build trust, and that's how you bring others along.
Yeah, I love this question. I will say I'm like, one of the things about me to my core is that I am a change agent. So I have always, sought out in my career opportunities where change and transformation was required, right? And organizations often communicate that that's what they desire, but their actual readiness for this is usually misaligned, right? But one of the things that, to your point that I've said before is like, you can be right, but you can be dead right. So you have to understand who is determining your success in that job, right? Are you aligned with them in terms of the way that you're going about it? No, it was never going to be frictionless, right? But you're trying to, again, feedback, right? You're trying to measure, is this friction that I should expect, that is a natural part of this process, and that the people that are determining my success are asking me to push on, or am I dead right? And I think you have to lean into those conversations with the right sponsors, the right stakeholders, and you've got to get the feedback to make sure that you're going about it in a way that feels palatable for the organization.
Also, let's assume that you are smart, right? We'll take that as read. You are a smart person. And so I think that there's something about how you are critically engaging with, like, is the thing I am doing the right thing? That's actually really important. Right? That's the last person that you should abandon in that conversation is yourself. Your judgment is very important there. And so if you think it's the right thing to do, I think you go farther. And when you're going farther, I think something you have to accept in change management that I think can be hard for some people is that you will lose people. And I think in pursuit of something we think is right, we have to be willing to lose people. Other questions? Don't let me down. There are 8 minutes left. Yes, we've got 2.
Make a good auctioneer. Right.
So I've been thinking about something, and this is about being visible to the leaders in front of us, but I'd like to flip the mirror a little bit and look back at those leaders and ask you guys from your perspectives, what are some of those things that the leaders before you have demonstrated or have taught you during your careers, positive or negative, that you've brought with you to get to where you are?
Yeah, hit it.
I would say one is empathy. I think some of the greatest leaders are empathetic. And I think the piece of empathy is that we're all human at the end of the day. And so obviously we're hired in positions to lead companies, to drive change, to drive productivity, but we also have to know that we are dealing with humans at every point of a company. And so you have to be able to understand humans. You have to be able to put yourself in that other person's shoe and really know like their motivations, know what is driving them, know their weaknesses, know how they may be doing and how they're showing up to work that day in order for you to be able to lead them and to influence them. And without having that level of empathy, I think that is something that some leaders fail at, oftentimes, is not being empathetic. I would say the second thing is the ability to influence. I learned from leaders in the past how to influence in the right way, and I've learned how to influence in the wrong way. And I would say the ones that influenced in the wrong way were the ones that led with almost a level of intimidation. They thought if people are afraid of me, then they will do what I want them to do, versus if people are inspired by me, if people want to make sure that they don't let me down, then they're motivated to actually perform. And so I think those are probably the top 2 things that I've learned from leaders that came before me.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I'll just add to that the authenticity and the empathy. I would say being vulnerable. I think as you become a leader, it's very easy to see leaders who are the so-called smartest people in the room. And that's a lot. That is a huge burden to bear, that you have all the answers. And I never wanted to be that. So I'm very vulnerable. I talk about what I don't know. I ask questions because there are subject matter experts in a room that are not me, and have different perspectives.
Yeah, I love that. I use the phrase strategic vulnerability a lot because I do actually think just showing truly where you are in relation to something makes everybody else feel like they can do the same thing.
Well, it's authentic.
Yeah, it's authentic. All right. My last guy right there.
Hello. Thank you for taking my question. I guess I wanted to ask, so given the kind of current like market volatility and stability, everything that's going on, I'm curious to ask like, how do you balance like long-term strategic like goals and plans versus like what just general concerns of everything that's going on?
Yeah. We have so much trouble hearing because of where the speakers are. So I'm going to repeat back to you. I think you said with all of the market volatility going on right now, how do you like balance your personal like long-term finance goals with how you're moving in that space? Is that right?
Well, I guess meant to say more career-wise, which I guess is in some sense finance related, but yeah, like career growth, like career plans of I want to go in XYZ direction, but there's just general instability and market volatility and whatnot.
Great. Did you guys get that? Okay.
I think, so when I started in the industry, it was 2007, September 2017, and it was during the first Trump administration. And during that time, there was a lot of volatility. There was a lot of turbulence. There was a lot of uncertainty. And instead of feeling like I could not plan for the future or feeling like my career was going to be stagnant in that moment, one of the things that my leaders told me was, this is the best time of your career. This is the time when you are truly going to learn, as Souzi said, resiliency. Because the way that our industry is, it has its ups and downs. And if you're newer to the industry, this is a very scary moment. I talk to people all the time and they're like, oh, I think I'm going to switch to a different industry because I don't know what's happening in the space right now. And I tell them, this is the time where you need to stay in the industry because you're going to learn so much. And what you're going to learn is going to be the thing that companies want to hire you for in the future, which is your ability to solve complex problems. We are solving problems every single day that people don't know how to solve today. And so for the future, if you have stuck it in, if you've been resilient, if you have learned in this market where you feel like it's volatile, where you feel like it's turbulent, it's unstable, if you've learned how to navigate this market and still get things done, that is going to catapult your career for the future.
Yeah. I would add to that, one, staying positive. It's not easy, but staying positive. It's an opportunity for you to go back to school, get certifications, upskill. Think about, again, any gaps that you have or challenge yourself. Everybody's talking about AI and data analytics. Is there an opportunity for you to get a certification there? It's also a good time to activate your network. And that's something we haven't talked about, but I talk a lot to my candidates and when I do courtesies with individuals. Think about people that you have met throughout your entire career. There's never a relationship or person that you haven't met that you should not be able to reach back and for a phone call or conversation to help you, for advice, for job opportunities. If you think about them on LinkedIn, seeing who you're connected to. So again, back to strategizing and mapping out that next move or opportunity, a lot of that is through your network.
Yeah, and opportunities may not look to you, right? But I think there are times in which, particularly in a constrained environment, like where maybe there aren't as many jobs open at your organization or there aren't as many roles that are shifting, like oftentimes that's not because people have less problems to solve or less work to do. So it can actually be a richer environment for you to seek out ways in which you can be valuable to others. That may not be an actual job on an org chart, but it can help you build credibility with a stakeholder that maybe otherwise you wouldn't have, or build a skill that when that next job becomes available, you are more ready for. So I think, yes, opportunity is part of the equation. But just because it may not show up like it does in a situation with a new job or a promotion doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Great. And with that, I'm just going to close with a final thought, just double clicking on something that Tanya said, which is Positivity is important. Mindset does matter. There is a thing I say to my team all the time, which is hard things don't have to be terrible. They can just be hard. And we can do hard things.